Guten Erev Shabbos, my holy sisters and brothers. Fantastic to be learning with you on a Friday afternoon, Yom Shishi, and making a SIYUM, celebrating the completion of Tractate Sotah, the 18th volume of the Talmud. With God's help, we'll finish it today and then just read the very first line of our next tractate, Gittin. Who's in the house for the SIYUM? And do you have a little l'chaim and something to nibble on when we make the finish so we can celebrate together? Paula, wishing everyone a good Friday afternoon. And Paula says Shabbat Shalom. And Lucy in Minnesota, and Sharon in New Jersey, Renee in Indiana, Melissa in Great Neck, Bill in mid-Missouri. Traveling this evening to visit my mother. We're going to clear out a storage shed of Nana's old things and have a good cry in the process. May that be a time of strengthening and togetherness for you and your family, Bill. Gosia in Chicago, wishing a Shabbat Shalom. Belle in stormy Texas, wishing everyone a good Shabbos. Leona in Illinois. Bella in Florida. Joe in the Inland Empire. Renee's in Indiana, ready for Gittin. Karen in Northern California. Ella wishes everyone a shalom. Marjorie in Georgia. Marie in Freeport. Welcome everybody to our SIYUM. I'm excited. We're going to have some high-end booze for our SIYUM. Going to make a l'chaim with some Macallan. And I think Nina will be bringing in a little snack toward the end of class. All right, let's do this. Our final daf, Mem Tes, page 49, here in Tractate Sotah, the 18th volume of the Talmud. We are in chapter 9, the final chapter, completing our discussion of Mishnah number 5, and God willing, we'll open and complete Mishnah number 6. These are the laws of the suspected adulteress, but we haven't talked much about the Sotah in these last, 10 or so pages. As we've been on an extended digression that opened with, did the oath of the Sotah need to be recited in Lashon Kodesh, in the holy language of Hebrew? No, it did not. It was necessary that the Sotah herself understood what she was vowing, and so if she didn't speak Hebrew, she didn't have to recite those words in Hebrew. But other things do have to be recited in Hebrew, like the ritual of the Egla Arufa, the heifer whose neck is broken when the victim of an unsolved murder, when that corpse was found in the field in the land of Israel. And then that led us to learn that after a while they didn't do that ritual anymore because it was only performed when it is unknown by anybody in the world who committed that murder. And tragically, as the spiritual level of the children of Israel in the ancient land of Israel diminished and diminished and diminished, eventually the first temple was destroyed, eventually the second temple was destroyed, and the third temple has not yet been built. And so as the spiritual level descended, we see that the sages decreed that certain rituals could no longer be performed. The Egla Arufa, because there were many murderers in the land. And so it was understood that, well, somebody probably knows who killed this person, even if we don't know. Even if the authorities don't know, somebody probably knows, and so it would be inappropriate to do that ritual. And that led to a discussion of other ways in which the sages could track or could point to and say, look how much the spiritual level of the people diminished. Once so-and-so died, scholarship went out, prophecy went out. We never had somebody at that level as somebody in the earlier generation. And we're seeing a bunch of these kinds of descriptions and pronouncements. We pick it up near the top of 49a. Rabbi Ilya Bar Yevarechia says, if it were not for the prayer of David, King David, for Israel to have sustenance, all Israel would be sellers of fat, revav, meaning that they would be involved in debased occupations that make in other words, because the land was no longer producing, when the children of Israel first went in, and God said, if you will follow my Torah, you will be blessed, and the land will be so fertile that everyone, will have a respectable occupation, and not only that, won't even have to work at it that hard, so you'll have plenty of time available to learn Torah. But as the level of the population diminished, it became more and more difficult to earn a living, and some people were left, toiling at very difficult and demeaning and literally dirty jobs, like selling this kind of, very, very kind of low end and slimy fat as a profession. But at least in the time of David, right, people didn't have to do that, right? And so these prayers of sustenance were effective. David's prayers for sustenance. If it were not for the prayer of David to have sustenance, all Israel would be sellers of fat. As it is stated, quote, place for them mastery, O Lord, Psalm 9. That is, may God grant them dignity. And Rabbi Ilya Bar Yevarechia also says, if it were not for the prayer of Habakkuk, 2 Torah scholars would have to cover themselves with a single cloak due to poverty and engage in Torah study dressed that way. As it is stated, quote, Lord, I heard your report and was afraid. O Lord, revive your work in the midst of the years, Habakkuk 3:2. And do not read in the midst, Bekerev of the years, Shanim, but rather in the closeness, Bikrov, of 2, Shanaim. In other words, Habakkuk prayed that God would nullify his decree of 2 Torah scholars having to share a single cloak as one of the curses if the people, strayed away from a life of Torah. And Rabbi Ilya Bar Yevarechia also says, in the case of 2 Torah scholars who were walking along the way, and there are no words of Torah between them, but they are conversing about other matters, they are deserving of being burned in fire, as it is stated with regard to Elijah and his disciple Elisha. And it was as they walked along talking that, behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, which parted them both asunder. 2 Kings 2:11. Now, the reason that they were not burned by the chariot of fire is that there was speech exchanged between them, which presumably was words of Torah. But if there had been no words of Torah, they would have been deserving of being burned by the chariot. This lesson is one that we encounter often, right? That people at the highest levels of piety and Torah scholarship are held to such a high and exacting standard, right? So it's not that it's a sin for, regular people to walk down the road talking about what they're going to have for lunch. But Torah scholars, just have this potential and this tremendous capacity to be performing the mitzvah of Torah learning at any time. And so if they waste that opportunity, a real opportunity was lost, right? Now, the sages might be speaking here a little bit hyperbolically, right? They're not saying that 2 Torah scholars who waste time are literally, doing a crime, deserving of the death penalty, but rather they're just being so emphatic that, if you have the opportunity to talk Torah, seize it. And Rabbi Ilya Bar Yevarechia says, if there are 2 Torah scholars who reside in the same city, and they are not pleasant to each other with regard to halacha, to Jewish law, but rather they are constantly fighting, so then one of them will die and the other one will be exiled, as it is stated, quote, that the manslayer might flee there who slays his neighbor without knowledge, Deuteronomy 4:4-2. Now that's talking about the cities of refuge which were created for the one who ended up killing someone by accident so that he could flee there and not be attacked by the family, right? The family of the victim in a kind of blood feud. But here they're reinterpreting that passage from the Torah as saying that knowledge means nothing other than Torah. As it is stated, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, right? So if two Torah scholars are in the same city, and rather than creating ways of pleasantness between them, but rather they're just fighting about knowledge, it's like, they're abusing the crown of Torah, not setting a good example for the townspeople, and they'll pay a price for that. Now, Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Chia, says, with regard to any Torah scholar who engages in Torah study while experiencing the pressure of poverty, so now this is a positive teaching, his prayer is listened to, as it is stated, quote, O people that dwells in Zion at Jerusalem, you shall weep no more. He will surely be gracious to you at the voice of your cry, and when he, meaning God, shall hear, he will answer you. From Isaiah 30:19. And after it is written, and the Lord shall give you sparse bread and scant water. So this verse indicates that those who sit and study Torah, that is, the people who dwell in Zion and eat bread sparingly, will have their prayers answered by God. Right? People who might otherwise be focusing on amassing wealth instead are focusing on learning Torah, and they don't really care that they're going to live an impoverished lifestyle. God will appreciate them and reward them for that. Now, Rabbi Abahu says a Torah scholar who engages in Torah study despite economic pressures is satiated with the glory of the divine presence, as it is stated in the same verse above, and your eyes shall behold your teacher. And Rabbi Acha, the son of Hanina, said, even the concealing partition, here using the word pargod, before the divine presence is not locked before him, as it is stated, and your teacher shall not hide himself anymore. What's interesting here is using this word pargod, which is a Greek word, right? It's from the Greek paragaudes, meaning a garment with a purple border, or the Latin paragauda, a laced border on a garment. And its origin is from the Persian pargad, which refers to the screen that divides the king from his palace retinue. And the Persian king would speak from behind the screen. And this is the basis for the borrowing of this term to describe a barrier in front of the divine presence. So interesting that they borrowed a word whose origin is Persian and was picked up in Greek and Latin. Now they brought it into, here they're talking about in Aramaic, but they're using it to describe such a holy thing, right? That in other words, that God is hidden in this world, right? So we say that sometimes you glimpse the higher world, heaven or the world of souls or the higher spiritual world, and that's like piercing the veil, right? That's how we say in English. But this veil, they would use the imagery of this curtain that divided the Persian king from his subjects, and he would speak to them from behind the screen. But here used it for the imagery that one who is not only a Torah scholar, but just doesn't care about, earning money so that he can just keep studying Torah, such a person will be privileged, to pierce that veil and have a much richer, more direct experience of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence. Now, the Mishna states that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua, from the day that the temple was destroyed, there is no day that does not include some form of curse. And Rava says each and every day is more cursed than the previous one, as it is stated in the chapter detailing the curses in the book of Deuteronomy. Quote, in the morning you will say, would that it were evening, and in the evening you will say, would that it were morning. Now we've talked about these curses, like the blessings and curses that were read to the people, to the children of Israel, when Joshua led them into the promised land. It said, if you will keep my statutes and ordinances, if you'll follow the Torah, you'll be blessed in so many different ways. But if you abandon the Torah, you will be cursed in so many different ways. And over time, all of those curses came true. And so they're detailing that. And they're saying, since the Torah said, in the morning you will wish that it was evening, in the evening you'll wish it was morning, right? Because your life is miserable. So now they're commenting, it is unclear which morning the verse means. If we say that in the evening he will wish it would be the following morning, Does he know that it will be the outcome of the next morning, that it'll be better, that causes him to yearn for its arrival? Rather, it must mean the morning that has passed. That is, in the evening they will pine for the previous morning because their situation is always getting worse. And the Gemara poses a question, but if everything is always getting worse, why does the world continue to exist? And the Gemara answers, by the sanctification that is said in the order of prayers after the passage that begins, and a Redeemer shall come to Israel, which includes the recitation and translation of the sanctification said by the angels, right? The Kedusha, Kadosh, 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 from Isaiah's vision of the angels singing in heaven. So it seems that by the merit of us chanting on earth what the angels chant in heaven, that holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, the whole world is filled with his glory. What happens according to the merit of that? Right? Why does the world continue to exist? By the sanctification that is said in the order of prayers, right? When we chant holy, 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 and by the response that we say, let his great name be blessed, etc., which is recited after the study of Agadah. And as it is stated, quote, a land of thick darkness, as darkness itself, a land of shadow of death without any order, from Job 10:22. Therefore, it can be inferred from this verse that if there are orders of prayer and study, the land shall appear from amidst the darkness. In other words, we've descended so far, right? Because as a population, right, as a nation, so many of us have strayed away from Torah. But thank God, there at least is a core who remains true to God and to Judaism and Jewish principles and a life of Torah, and the world is sustained by those people. Now, the Mishna taught that since the destruction of the temple, dew, D-E-W, has not descended for a blessing, and the taste has been removed from fruit. And it is taught in a Baraisa that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says the lost purity has removed the taste and the aroma, and the tides that were not separated have removed the fat of grain. And the Gemara relates that Rav Huna found a fragrant date. Right? They're saying, well, the fruit has become less tasty and the grain has become less nourishing because the whole, our level has dropped, and the level of the land and the prosperity and the fecundity, the fertility of the land, all of it has fallen since the days when we were, working and living at a much higher spiritual level. So now people are going to say, well, wait a minute. I mean, it's not like fruit is tasteless. It's not like fruit is odorless. We find tasty fruit. I mean, maybe they're going to say, but it's less tasty than it was before, right? But first they were going to argue. So the Gemara relates that Rav Huna found a fragrant date, right? The fruit date. And he took it and wrapped it in his shawl. And Rabbah, his son, came and said to him, I smell the aroma of a fragrant date. And Rav Huna said to him, my son, there is clearly purity in you, as you were able to notice the fragrance. And he gave it to him. Meanwhile, Abba, Rabbah's son, arrived. So Rabbah took the date and gave it to his son. And Rav Huna said to Rabbah, my son, you have made my heart rejoice with your purity, and you have blunted my teeth by showing your preference for your own son. And the Gemara comments, this explains the folk saying that people say, the love of a father is for the sons, and the love of the sons is for their own sons, more than for their father. Right? I mean, in other words, we're commanded, right, to honor our parents. We're not commanded to love our children or to honor our children because it's just so natural for anyone to love their children. We love our parents as well, but it takes one of the 10 commandments to be sure, that we behave as lovingly toward our parents. We don't have to be commanded to do that for our children. Now, the Gemara relates another incident. Rav Acha bar Yaakov took care of Rav Yaakov, the son of his daughter, who was an orphan. And when the grandchild grew up, his grandfather once said to him, give me water to drink. And his grandson said to him, I am not your son, and I am not obligated in your honor as a son must honor his father. And the Gemara again comments, and this explains the folk saying that people say, raise your grandchild, but in the end, he will retort, I am the son of your daughter, and I do not have to take care of you. Is this to say that a Torah scholar, the grandson of a Torah scholar, was so ungrateful as to not give his grandfather a glass of water to drink? And the answer is no, he gave him the water. Of course he gave him the water. But in talking about the obligations of a grandson to his grandfather, it's not the same as the obligation of a child to his or her father or his or her mother, right? The Torah commands us to honor our parents, and we should certainly extend honor to our grandparents, but it's not the same literal obligation as to the parents. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 5. Here's Mishnah number 6, the final Mishnah of our tractate. In the war, Polemus, of Vespasian, the sages decreed upon the crowns of bridegrooms, i.e. that bridegrooms may no longer wear crowns, and upon the drums, meaning they also banned the playing of drums. Who was Vespasian? He was the general in charge of the siege of Jerusalem, and that led to the destruction of the Second Temple. He was not directly responsible for that because while he was engaged in this long and bitter campaign against the Israelites, he was recalled to Rome and crowned emperor. And so the general that was appointed to take his place, Titus, is the one who finished the war and destroyed the Second Temple. And Titus's end was not a good one. So at any rate, in this war that ended with the destruction of the Second Temple, the sages decreed upon the crowns of bridegrooms. And we'll hear more about that in the Gemara, what that means, as well as this decree about drums. Now, then they switched the name. In the War of Titus, they also decreed upon the crowns of brides, and they decreed that a person should not teach his son Greek. So what you can really see is you could say the War of Vespasian, right, is the earlier part of this war that ended in the destruction of the Second Temple, and the War of Titus is the later part of that same war. Now they say in the last war. Now, this refers to the Bar Kokhba revolt. That's about 65 years after the destruction of the Second Temple, which, as terrible as the destruction of the Second Temple was, there wasn't as great a loss of life as there was in the Bar Kokhba revolt 65 years later. So in that war, the last war, as it's called here, they decreed that a bride may not go out in a palanquin. I'm not sure. That's a word I've read, but haven't pronounced out loud in English. Hopefully I'm saying it right. A palanquin, Palanquin, a palanquin inside the city. But our sages permitted a bride to go out in a palanquin inside the city, as this helps the bride maintain her modesty. And the Mishnah, it's a kind of, vehicle, right? Except I think it's carried by people. What is that? I think a palanquin is, one of these like people carried on their shoulders, and it's a seat on top that an aristocrat would ride in. Now the Mishnah lists more things that ceased from the time when Rabbi Meir died. Those who related parables ceased. From the time when Ben Azai died, the diligent ceased. From the time when Ben Zoma died, the exegetists ceased. From the time when Rabbi Kiva died, the honor of the Torah ceased. From the time when Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa died, the men of wondrous action ceased. From the time when Rabbi Yosei the Small died, the pious were no more. And why was he called the Small? Because he was the smallest of the pious, meaning he was one of the least important of the pious men. And from the time when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai died, the glory of wisdom ceased. From the time when Rabbi Gamliel the elder died, the honor of the Torah ceased, and purity and asceticism died. And from the time when Rabbi Yishmael ben Pavi died, the glory of the priesthood ceased. And from the time when Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi died, humility and fear of sin ceased. Now, is it that after Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi died, no one was left in the world who was humble, and no one who feared sin was left in the world? Of course not. But these sages were operating at such a high level that when they died, it was like never was it quite the same again. That's Mishnah number 6. Here comes the Gemara. The sages taught. Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair says, from the time when the Second Temple was destroyed, the Chaverim and free men of noble lineage were ashamed, and their heads were covered in shame, and men of action dwindled, and violent and smooth-talking men gained the upper hand, and none seek, and none ask, and none inquire of the fear of heaven. Upon whom is there for us to rely? Only upon our Father in heaven. Rabbi Eliezer the Great says, from the day the second temple was destroyed, the generations have deteriorated. Scholars have begun to become like scribes that teach children. And scribes have become like beadles that assist rabbis. Or rather, that tend to the physical needs of a synagogue. And beadles have become like beadles, B-E-A-D-L-E-S, right? So the beadle is sometimes called like a sexton, right? It's almost like the janitor of the synagogue, right? And beadles have become like ignoramuses. And ignoramuses are increasingly diminished. And none ask and none seek. Upon whom is there to rely? Only upon our Father in heaven. We're on 49b. And he also said, in the times of the approach of the Messiah, right? So what will we witness in the final days before Mashiach comes? In the times of the approach of Mashiach, impudence will increase, and high costs will pile up. Although the vine shall bring forth its fruit, wine will nevertheless be expensive, and the monarchy shall turn to heresy, and there will be none to give reproof about this. The meeting place of the sages will become a place of promiscuity, and the Galilee shall be destroyed, and the Gavlan will be desolate, and the men of the border shall go round from city to city to seek charity, but they will find no mercy. And the wisdom of scribes will putrefy, and people who fear sin will be held in disgust, and the truth shall be absent. And the youth will shame the face of the elders, and elders will stand before minors, right? And it's starting to sound familiar, right? Maybe this is now. This idea that up is down, down is up. You know, elders are forced to honor minors, right? People who deserve respect are forced to give respect to the ones who are lesser. Normal family relations will be ruined. A son will disgrace a father. A daughter will rise up against her mother. A daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his household. The face of the generation will be like the face of a dog. A son will no longer be ashamed before his father. And upon what is there for us to rely when the world gets so topsy-turvy? Whom can we look to and what can we trust? Only in our Father in heaven. Now, Rav says concerning the decree banning that we read in our Mishnah, this decree banning the wearing of crowns, right? That they said that once the final war that led to the destruction of the Second Temple came, they decreed against crowns for bridegrooms, right? So previously, when Jewish men would get married, they would wear some kind of a crown, not the crown of a king, but some kind of a headpiece that was later prohibited. Where am I? So Rav says concerning the decree banning the wearing of crowns, that they taught this law only with regard to crowns of salt and sulfur, but those of myrtle and rose are permitted. And Shmuel says that even crowns of myrtle and rose are prohibited, but those made of reeds and bulrush are permitted. And Levi says even crowns of reeds and bulrush are prohibited. And likewise, Levi teaches in his Baraisa, even those of reeds and bulrush are prohibited. And the Mishnah taught that the sages decreed against the wearing of crowns for bridegrooms and upon the drums. So the Gemara says, what is this drum? And Rabbi Elazar says, a drum with one mouth. And the Gemara relates a story involving this instrument. Rabba bar Rav Huna made a tambourine for his son, and his father, Rav Huna, came and broke it. And he said to him, the instrument will be confused for a drum with one mouth, and people will assume that a drum with one mouth is permitted. Instead, go and make for him a small drum on the mouth of an earthen jug. or on the mouth of a container used for measuring kafitza, a small instrument, which did not pose the concern of being confused with this drum with one mouth. That's just a colorful name for a particular kind of drum that had been prohibited by the sages in the wake of the destruction of the temple, which became, an extended time of national mourning, which has not ended. Now, the father taught that in the war of Titus, right, Titus who eventually destroyed the second temple, the sages decreed upon the crowns of brides. And the Gemara clarifies, what are the crowns of brides? And Rabbi Bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says, a city of gold. This was a gold crown engraved with the design of the city of Jerusalem, worn by women as an ornament. And this is also taught in a Baraisa. Which are the crowns of brides that were forbidden? The crown of a bride is a city of gold. However, one may make it as a cap of fine wool. And the sages even decreed upon the canopy of grooms, the chuppah. And the Gemara asks, what is the type of canopy of grooms that was prohibited? As they certainly did not ban the marriage chuppah, the canopy under which a couple is married. And the Gemara answers, it means the golden crimson clothes, dyed red and crimson and decorated with gold, which they would hang on a marriage canopy. And this is also taught in a Baraisa. These are the canopy of grooms the sages banned, the golden crimson clothes. But he may make a papyrus construction and hang upon it whatever he wants, even ornaments made of gold. In other words, just like we still keep the tradition to break a glass at a wedding, because we always remember our sadness that the temple was destroyed, even in the midst of our most joyous occasions, which is a wedding. Likewise, we see where that tradition began, right? That as soon as the second temple was destroyed, they just banned practices that were about beautifying and uplifting the wedding, and they just it's not that they said that a wedding needs to be a miserable time, but they prohibited certain practices that would then be a reminder, right, that our joy can never be complete, even at a wedding, in the absence of the temple. Now, the Mishna taught that during the war of Titus, the sages decreed that a person should not teach his son Greek. And the sages taught that this decree came about as a result of an incident. When the kings of the Hasmonean monarchy besieged each other in their civil war. So now we're talking about, more than 100 years, maybe a couple hundred years before the destruction of the Second Temple. So during the Second Temple period, who were the Hasmonean kings, right? The Hasmonean kings were in the wake of the Hanukkah story. So when the kings of the Hasmonean monarchy besieged each other in their civil war, Hyrcanus was outside of Jerusalem besieging it, and Aristobulus was inside. So on each and every day, they would lower dinars in a box from inside the city, and those on the outside would send up animals for them to bring the daily offerings in the temple, right? Because you had a civil war. So this was Jews versus Jews. They were not sovereign in the land of Israel, right? This was the time of the Greek Empire. So they still had kind of a foreign governor ruling over the land of Israel. But nonetheless, among the Israelites themselves, there was this civil war. It's that same civil war. I'm not sure exactly the same, as same idea, but what was Hanukkah all about? It was the Hellenized Greeks. The Hellenized Jews, the Jews that had assimilated into Greek culture and were leaving behind Judaism. And wanted, to justify themselves to themselves by saying, well, we should do away with all Jewish practice and do away with the temple, etc. And the loyal Jews who were maintaining Judaism and a life of Torah and certainly bringing the sacrifices every day. It was, and there was a lot of sort of sub-wars of that general civil war. And so there was during that period, there was a time when Jerusalem was besieged, and they couldn't bring the animals for the daily offerings to bring in the temple. And so the Jews that were under siege in the temple were sort of bribing, people from the surrounding army to bring them the animals they needed so they could keep bringing the offerings in the temple. But they were, of course, paying an absolutely exorbitant cost for those animals to get them into Jerusalem in the midst of a war. So how were they doing this? So they were smuggling the animals in, like over the wall of Jerusalem. They lowered, some on a rope, some money. And then the people down there would attach a lamb to that rope, and they would pull it up, and then they would bring that offering in the temple. So on each and every day, they would lower dinars in a box from inside the city, and those on the outside would send up animals for them to bring the daily offerings in the temple. So a certain elder was there in Jerusalem who was familiar with Greek wisdom, and he communicated to those on the outside by means of Greek wisdom, using words understood only by those proficient in Greek wisdom. And he said to them, as long as they are engaged in the temple service, they will not be delivered into your hands. And upon hearing this, on the following day, when they lowered dinars in a box, they sent up a pig to them. Once the pig reached halfway up the wall, it inserted its hooves into the wall, and the land of Israel shuddered for 400 parsangs. And when the sages saw this, they said at that time, cursed is the person who raises pigs, and cursed is the person who teaches his son Greek wisdom. Right? They were very, very, angry about Greek wisdom. Now you can say, trying to keep people from learning secular knowledge, it's like you can't put that genie back in the bottle, as it were, and sort of keeping a people ignorant so that it will remain true, to its religious principles, maybe is doomed to fail. However, look at, what actually happened. Right? They said, just like those, in that period, these Jews who became Hellenized and just completely left Torah behind and brought great destruction to the Jewish people, you could see why the sages would say, that's it. Don't teach your children Greek or Greek wisdom. They shouldn't be learning about Plato or Socrates, etc. And that helped save the Jewish people in that time. And we see the same kind of idea in Europe in the 1800s, right? The 17 and 1800s, in the wake of the Enlightenment, called the Haskalah, and you had so many Jews leaving the fold, right? And then you had other Jewish communities kind of closing ranks and saying that kind of, Western, Latin, Greek science tradition that eventually produced the Enlightenment is dangerous to the Jews. Right? And then you had people like Rabbi Hirsch, who was saying, well, we can take the best of science. We're not going to live, in a cave. We can learn science, but we have to close ranks on living a life of Torah Jews. We have to maintain our identity as Torah Jews. Whereas other leaders were saying you just can't learn any of that stuff because the end of it is people going away from Torah. So it's the same battle that was being fought, more than 2,000 years ago. And that's why they decreed at that time, no, you cannot teach your children Greek wisdom. It's too dangerous. And with regard to that year of civil war in which the land was destroyed, we learned in Tractate Menachos on page 64b that an incident occurred in which the Omer, the measure of barley brought as a communal offering on the 16th of Nisan, right? That's when we start counting the Omer on the second day of Passover, that it came from Gagot Serifim, and the 2 loaves offered on Shavuos, that we'll be offering next Friday, came from, that we'll be celebrating. We don't bring those loaves anymore since the temple is destroyed. But at any rate, we'll be celebrating Shavuos next Friday. That the 2 loaves needed as an offering for Shavuos, they came from the valley of Ein Socher. In other words, it was so difficult to get what was needed for the offerings that they had to send from far away because, the Jews were enmeshed in that civil war. Now, it is understood from both the Mishna and the Baraisa that it is prohibited to learn Greek. Now, the Gemara questions this. Is that so? But didn't Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, right, who the redactor of the Mishnah, the famous Rebbe, didn't he say, in the land of Israel, why should people speak the tongue of Syriac, Circe? which is the kind of Aramaic commonly spoken in the land of Israel. Rather, they should speak either in Lashon Kodesh, the sacred tongue of Hebrew, or in the beautiful language of Greek. This is Rebbe talking. And Rav Yosef similarly said, in Bavel, right, in Babylonia, why should they speak in the vernacular tongue of Aramaic? Rather, they should speak either in the sacred tongue of Hebrew or in the tongue of Persian, which is used by the authorities, right? They didn't like Aramaic because it was viewed as a distortion of Hebrew. So better, you should either speak Hebrew or some other language than Aramaic, including the beautiful language of Greek. So the Gemara answers, there is a difference. The Greek tongue is discreet and Greek wisdom is discreet. And the sages prohibited Greek wisdom from being taught, not Greek language. So it wasn't just that you could learn Greek and communicate in Greek. There was nothing wrong with that. What was dangerous, right, was learning Greek philosophy, which would lead a Jew to stray from Torah. Now the Gemara poses a question, but is it true that Greek wisdom was prohibited? But didn't Rav Yehuda say that Shmuel said in the name of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel? What is the meaning of that which is written, quote, my eye afflicted my soul due to all the daughters of my city, Ecclesiastes 3:51. So there were 1,000 children in my father's house, which is the prince's household. 500 of them learned Torah, and the other 500 learned Greek wisdom. And there only remained of them after the Bar Kokhba revolt, me here in the land of Israel, and the son of my father's brother who lives in Asia Minor. So in other words, he was telling that story apropos of how many were killed in the Bar Kokhba revolt. But we learn, incidentally, that Rabban Gamliel, who was the Nasi, right, the head of the Sanhedrin, that members of his household were learning Greek wisdom. So if Greek wisdom was prohibited, why would the Nasi of the Sanhedrin permit it to be taught in his own household? And the Gemara answers, the members of the house of Rabban Gamliel are different, as they are close to the monarchy. And therefore, they had to learn Greek wisdom in order to converse with people of authority. Right? They were, first of all, learned enough in Torah that they could also learn Greek wisdom and not lose their adherence to Torah. And it was necessary for them to learn that so that they could converse with the monarchy, right? Meaning the Romans in that time, who the educated people of Rome were also learning Greek wisdom. And it was necessary to sort of, the leadership of Israel under Rome needed to sort of conduct themselves like the aristocrats of Rome so that they could maintain good relations with them and advocate for the Jewish people. It wasn't that everybody needed to do that, just literally the leadership, so that they could, in other words, they were like ambassadors and they had to be able to speak the language of upper class Romans, which included knowing Greek wisdom. As it is taught in a Baraisa, one who cuts his hair in the Komi style, which was the Gentile fashion of cutting and wearing the hair, is considered to be acting in the ways of the Amorites, and it is prohibited to act in this way. However, they permitted Avtalos ben Reuven to cut his hair in the Komi style, as he is close to the monarchy of Rome, and similarly, they permitted the house of Rabban Gamliel to teach Greek wisdom, to study Greek wisdom, because they are close to the monarchy. So the Mishnah taught, in the last war of the Bar Kokhba rebellion, the sages decreed that a bride may not go out in a palanquin inside the city, but the later sages permitted it. And the Gemara explains what is the reason they permitted this practice: due to modesty, so that brides should not have to go out into the street and be seen by all. I guess a palanquin would have curtains around them and would be for the modesty of the bride. And the Mishnah taught that from the time when Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai died, wisdom ceased. And the sages taught from the time when Rabbi Eliezer died, it was as if the Torah scroll had been buried, as he had memorized many secrets of the Torah. And from the time when Rabbi Yehoshua died, counsel and deliberate thought ceased, as he had the sharpest mind in Israel. And from the time when Rabbi Akiva died, the powerful arm of Torah, meaning the exposition of all the details of Torah scripture, ceased, and the fountains of wisdom were sealed. From the time when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah died, the crowns of wisdom ceased, as, quote, the crown of the wise is their riches, Proverbs 14:24, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was both a great Torah scholar and a very wealthy man. And from the time when Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa died, the men of wondrous deeds ceased. From the time when Abba Yosef ben Katonta died, the pious men ceased. And why was he called Abba Yosef ben Katonta? Because he was among the diminished miktane of the pious people, meaning he lived in an era when the pious had become few. I am almost done, which means we're approaching the SIYUM when we recite what we say when we finish a tractate of Talmud. So get ready for what we say when we make a SIYUM. From the time when Ben Azai died, the diligent ceased. From the time when Ben Zoma died, the exegeticists ceased. From the time when Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel died, locusts ascended upon the land and troubles proliferated. From the time when Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi died, the troubles multiplied. And the final line of the Mishna states that from the time when Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi died, humility and fear of sin ceased. And Rav Yosef said to the Tana who reviewed the Mishnah, "Do not teach that humility ceased, for there is still one who is humble, namely me." And Rav Nachman similarly said to the Tana who reviewed the Mishnah, "Do not teach that fear of sin ceased, for there is still one who fears sin, namely me." Now, is it a little surprising that that Rav Yosef, would say, "Don't say that humility died. I am humble." Right? Is that like contradicting himself to say that, don't say that there's no more humble people. I'm very humble, right? I'm the humblest of all men. But no, the way that this is understood is that Rabbi Yosef didn't want falsehood to be said. So it's not that there was no humility in the land. It's that we don't have people with humility on the level as those people who were lost before us. But there are humble people. And Rabbi Yosef is so humble that he's saying, look, I'm still around. I'm humble. I wish I was humbler. But if you can call me, without lying, a humble person, then I'm telling you there's lots of humble people still around. Because, I can be characterized as humble, but I'm not the humblest guy around. God forbid I would say that. And that concludes Tractate Sotah. And so we go right to what we say in a SIYUM. We say the first paragraph 3 times. We shall return to you, Tractate Sotah, and your glories upon us. Our thoughts are upon you, Tractate Sotah, and your thoughts are upon us. We will not be forgotten from you, Tractate Sotah, and you will not be forgotten from us, neither in this world nor in the world to come. We shall return to you, Tractate Sotah, and your glories upon us. Our thoughts are upon you, Tractate Sotah, and your thoughts are upon us. We will not be forgotten from you, Tractate Sotah, and you will not be forgotten from us, neither in this world nor in the world to come. We shall return to you, Tractate Sotah, and your glories upon us. Our thoughts are upon you, Tractate Sotah, and your thoughts are upon us. We will not be forgotten from you, Tractate Sotah, and you will not be forgotten from us, neither in this world nor in the world to come. May it be your will, Lord our God and God of our ancestors, that your Torah will be our avocation in this world and will accompany us to the world to come. And then we list the sons of Rav Papa. All of his sons were Torah scholars. Hanina bar Papa, Rame bar Papa, Nachman bar Papa, Achai bar Papa, Abba, Mari bar Papa, Rafram bar Papa, Rakish bar Papa, Surcha bar Papa, Ada bar Papa, Daru bar Papa. Please, Lord, our God, make the words of your Torah sweet in our mouths and in the mouths of your people, the house of Israel, so that we, our descendants, and their descendants, and the descendants of your people, the house of Israel, may all know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Your commandments make me wiser than my enemies, for they are ever with me. Let my heart be undivided in your statutes, in order that I may not be put to shame. I will never forget your precepts, for with them you have quickened me. Blessed are you, O Lord. Teach me your statutes. Amen, amen, amen. Selah forever. We give thanks before you, Lord our God and God of our ancestors, that you have placed our lot among those who sit in the study hall, and that you have not given us our portion among those who sit idly on street corners. We rise early, and they rise early. We rise early to pursue matters of Torah, and they rise early to pursue frivolous matters. We toil, and they toil. We toil and receive a reward, and they toil and do not receive a reward. We run, and they run. We run to the life of the world to come, and they run to the pit of destruction, as it is stated. But you, you, God will bring them down into the pit of destruction. Men of blood and deceit shall not live out half their days, but as for me, I will trust in you. May it be your will, Lord our God. Just as you have assisted me in completing tractate Sotah, so assist me to begin other tractates and books and conclude them, to learn and to teach, to observe and to perform, and to fulfill all the teachings of your Torah with love. And may the merit of all the Tanaim and Amoraim and Torah scholars stand for me and my descendants, so that the Torah will not move from my mouth and from the mouths of my descendants and the descendants of my descendants forever. And may the verse, when you walk it shall lead you, when you lie down it shall watch over you, and when you awaken it shall talk with you, may that be fulfilled in me. For in the Torah your days shall be multiplied, and the years of your life shall be increased. Length of days is in her right hand, in her left are riches and honor. May the Lord give strength to his people. The Lord will bless his people with peace. Here is Nina stepping in. Let's get this over here. We'll move the candle over there. Okay, we'll widen this out. Let's not cover your face with
Last
the
time
microphone.
I had to hide behind the microphone the whole time.
Okay, here we go. I guess I'm loud enough I'll be heard by the mic.
Hello, everybody! So good to see so many familiar names and faces. This is, I gotta confess, when I first heard we were going to be spending 49 days learning the laws of the suspected adulteress, I was like, oh, that doesn't sound very pleasant. But how do you like all those digressions on top of digressions, between digressions? Such fascinating stuff in this tractate. I might say actually maybe one of the absolute best ones in terms of so many, just going off in so many directions. So I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did. I do not have what's called a Gemara cop, which means I don't really have a head for Talmud study. It's very hard for me to follow what's going on, but when there's stories with characters and, you know, life lessons, that's when I get engaged. So we definitely had that this time.
Are we not all so blessed to have Nina? I mean, there's no AT without Nina. She is always behind the scenes, monitoring the questions and comments, feeding them to me, literally feeding me now.
People have such good questions. It really blows my mind.
Yeah.
It really blows my mind. Yeah.
Did you list some questions before you came over?
Yeah, there's a few there.
Okay, so let's make the SIYUM and then we'll do some questions. And maybe we should do like the first line of Gittin immediately. Okay. As soon as we finish a tractate, we right away want to open the next tractate. So this is our next tractate, Gittin, which is the laws of the get, a divorce. The one after this is Kiddushin, the laws of the marriage. You might think, wouldn't you do marriage before divorce? Why isn't tractate Kiddushin before tractate Gittin? There's a lot of answers given for that, but a good one is, and I forget who said it, I should know, but I'm not sure. He says, well, we don't think that divorce follows marriage. That's rare and exceptional and sad, and you know, it should happen as little as possible. But we do want that marriage follows divorce. So, okay, it turned out that they weren't compatible, but they should find their besherets, and they should find happiness and raise a family even after a divorce. And so that's why we write.
Can I share my opinion?
Yes,
I think that if you have the laws of marriage before the laws of divorce, like it's kind of, I think it's important for people to know, well, here's what's at stake. You know, do you want to go through all of this before you make your choice, before you get married? You know, think this through because the stakes are high. So good. That's a different perspective.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay.
We're starting on page 2, I assume.
Page 2a, Tractate Gittin, the 19th volume of the Talmud. Here we go. Mishnah number 1. I'm just going to read the beginning of it. An agent who brings a bill of divorce, a get, from a husband to his wife from a country overseas, meaning from outside the land of Israel to Israel, is required to state the following formula when he hands over the bill of divorce. This bill of divorce was written in my presence and it was signed in my presence. More about that tomorrow. Now it's time to celebrate. A l'chaim for you, my darling. And a l'chaim for Glenn, our true accidental Talmudist, who's back here cutting our movie, Man in the Long Black Coat. Yeah. That's how he wears the headphones when I'm teaching so that he can keep cutting.
Glenn, by the way, is a phenomenal editor.
Phenomenal, that's true.
We couldn't be making this movie without him. And we just can't wait for all of you to see it.
Amen. So, we'll make the bracha first. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaro.
Amen.
And having made the blessing, we can make a l'chaim, 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 my holy sisters and brothers,
l'chaim.
To life, to learning, and to joy.
Amen.
We can have a little snack, so we can make this bracha.
So I'll show you our little snack. I don't know if the camera can see without it.
Yeah.
So I have a pesto dip, and a butternut squash dip.
Very nice.
And these guys here are called kichel. They're basically like crackers, but kind of tasty.
Kind of tasty cracker.
Yeah.
Want a cracker?
Sure.
Here you are. It's always super embarrassing to eat on camera because then I'm chewing. Like so I will just take a nibble so that I can get back to talking. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei mizonos. Okay. Let's answer some questions before we leave. Tractate Sotah behind. This is what happens, right? I have to always reload, and that's what that pause is.
Okay.
So Nina sends me the questions via this Google Doc. So Sharon says, what if the grandparents are the ones who in fact raised the child? Which was the case in that story. And I think what they're saying is, morally, ethically, lovingly, in every
Even though
way.
they might be,
You owe everything to a grandparent, especially one who steps in and essentially adopts you. And by the way, you definitely have that same obligation to an adoptive parent that you have to a regular parent. So if that grandparent essentially adopts the person, then I think it does become the parent.
Oh.
But if it's not so formal as an adoption, you still act the same way, but it's not the same mitzvah, I think is what they were saying. Mickey says, this Shabbat is Shabbos Mevarchim. We're blessing the new Hebrew month. Which month is that? Sivan. That's the month that contains Shavuos, right? The celebration of receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai, and my birthday. And so on the Shabbos, before we start, before Rosh Chodesh, in synagogue, we'll bless the new month. In our shul, it's awesome. It's like we sing that. It's so beautiful. And we pray to God that He'll bless the new month in every way, with health, with prosperity, with learning, with all good things. Says Mickey, this Shabbos is Shabbos Mevarchim, the Shabbos that blesses the new month. A special prayer is recited, blessing the Rosh Chodesh of the upcoming month of Sivan, which falls on Sunday. Exactly. Thank you, Mickey. And so it's Rosh Chodesh is Sunday. That's interesting. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I will not be leading the prayers on Sunday. A mourner davens from one in St. Kaddish. For a parent, tries to lead the prayers as often as possible, but we don't do it on holidays, including Rosh Chodesh.
By the way, I just want to say that Sal leads. So leading prayers is not easy. Where he goes, which is basically the closest minyan to us, is a full-on Hasidic synagogue. Everybody there pretty much their family has been super religious for 2,000 years. Okay. And so Sal, just doesn't have that background. So I got to hand it to you to get up there. I mean, it's very difficult. And in that kind of, it's a tough crowd.
It's a tough crowd. And I always say, I always manage to find a new mistake to make every time. But I've gotten more comfortable. And I mean, I'm in my 9th month now of doing this, or 8th or 9th month, but just lately, I'm starting to kind of be comfortable enough that I'm not just saying the prayers. I'm starting to express myself a little bit kind of like even in Hebrew, a little bit more animated the way I am with you. And people seem to be appreciating it.
Special Sal touch.
The Sal touch. But listen, if you're saying Kaddish, God forbid it comes a time in your life when you're saying Kaddish, and they tell you, okay, so lead the prayers, and you're like, I can't do that. I'm not familiar enough with the prayers to lead. You know what? Start with 1 or 2 prayers.
And identify somebody in the congregation that's going to be your
Someone
coach.
will be happy to help you and stand by you while you're doing it, and just take it on. Take it on. It's really a wonderful thing to do for the merit of the departed parent. And it's difficult and it's scary, but if I can do it, you could do it.
And Sal is really doing a lot in the merit of his beloved mother, Kathy. He's also not listening to music for an entire, basically 11 months, which is a big sacrifice for anybody, especially Sal, who is always listening to the Grateful Dead in his car.
Yeah, I haven't had the Dead on in my car since last September.
So like around then I was driving Sal's car, and I went to look at the radio stations that are already selected. The Grateful Dead wasn't there. I was like, what happened? Now I get it. So he's making big sacrifices.
Hopefully it helps my mom a little bit
I'm sure
in the
it does.
world of souls. Lucy says, don't we always think that the problems of our time are the worst? Some people today would say similar things of the sages then, or so it seems to me.
That's a great point, because when you were listing the various things, I was thinking like, that really sounds like today. So would people have always said that? I don't know. That's a great question.
Right. Okay, and a lot of people are chiming in and saying amen, and that they enjoyed the tractate. It really was a fascinating tractate.
So interesting.
It's unexpected. I mean, I didn't remember from my last time through how rich Sotah would be. They were really long dafs. Now that we're starting Gittin, we're back to quite short pages. So like tomorrow night's page, Saturday night, wonderful time to have a short page. Very short page.
Is it evil that I'm happy about that? Especially on a Saturday night. Yeah.
That's it. That's what we've got for us today. May everybody be blessed that just as we've opened and completed Tractate Sotah, so may we as a community and you as an individual open and complete many tractates of learning. And we say amen, and may you be blessed with a peaceful and invigorating and rejuvenating Shabbos, and we say amen. And we're just sending you all our love. That's it.